Hi, and welcome to our next episode of Authenticity. My name is Megan Niesler, and I'm the Executive Director at Lutheran Counseling Services in Winter Park, Florida. And we are a counseling agency committed to creating safe places for people to change their story. And so we're using this platform to encourage through this crazy crisis time in our world. We really want to encourage authentic conversations, active listening skills. And so on this platform, we bring different people on to share their story. And so I am joined by Sarah today, who runs a nonprofit in honor of her son, I believe. So Sarah, would you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, hi guys. Thanks for first of all having me on. We always just love sharing our story and being able to just connect with people. A couple of things. My husband and I, we live in Phoenix, Arizona. We have four kids. They are seven, 6, 4, and almost 2. We have 3 boys and a girl, and our third son, his name is Fritz, back in 2017 was diagnosed with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, which is a very rare disease, one in about 3,500 boys. Typically, it's a genetic disease. The weird thing with our situation is it does not actually run in our genes. He was a spontaneous mutation, hence why my other kiddos are healthy kiddos. So we were also a bit shocked when we were given that type of diagnosis. We just knew early on. I watched him and he just wasn't quite like the other boys. And so I had to kind of mama bear, really push hard for some answers, never thinking that I'd get the answer of Duchenne, because it's not one I ever wanted, obviously, but we have answers now. And kind of from that diagnosis, it just kind of naturally worked that we started this nonprofit to really raise awareness, to raise funds, to try and really advocate for him and so many other families. Within rare disease, you're your best advocate and you have to put in the work if you want to see results. So we started a nonprofit called Fritz and Friends, and we run events. Really, we've been all over the country with events. We travel to doctors all over the country. We've had friends from all over the country host things for us, and we do a lot of things here locally, as well as just kind of on social media platforms. So it's been a really wild, crazy adventure.
And so your nonprofit raises money specifically for what? What do you guys use the money that you raise for?
We right now have partnered with this other biotech nonprofit called Cure Rare Disease. And what they're doing and why we've opted to work with them is they're basically creating customized therapies for individuals with rare disease. So how that's different is typically in rare disease world, these pharma companies come in and try to create this one-size-fits-all drug, which within rare disease, because it's rare, it's very complicated, that doesn't always work. And in our journey, Fritz was not amenable to anything that was in the pipeline for Duchenne, which is frustrating. Great for the Duchenne community that they have things moving within gene therapy, but Fritz had some circumstances that just disqualified him from all those potential options. So we've partnered with this organization that has this different approach, that instead of trying to create this drug for this one-size fits all for these very complicated diseases, they go in to the individual and they create a customized drug using this technology called CRISPR that basically goes in at the DNA level and can correct the error on his DNA that causes Duchenne, and hopefully we can call it a cure. So that's what we're working towards. That's what we're funding, and we're just stoked to be a part of an organization that's doing that really game-changing work and could really change the course for anyone living with rare disease in the future. So
that company is working with, like you said, any rare disease, not just specifically Duchenne. It's any rare disease.
So it's a new nonprofit that has started, and so their first set of patients is Duchenne specific. The founder of the nonprofit, his brother has Duchenne, and that's been his motivating factor. And so he started this with this idea that yes, Duchenne will be the start because that hits close to home for him. But then once the infrastructure is in place, there's an ecosystem where these rare disease patients could kind of go through this set of guidelines to get this customized therapy. It would be for really anyone living with any sort of rare disease.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit too how you got connected to us and landed here. I know you know Laura Blank, and she is a longtime staff, a great friend of mine. So tell me your connection with Laura.
Yeah, so Laura and I went to college together at Concordia, Nebraska. And she knows my husband as well. That's where my husband and I both met. And then her and I actually, right after my husband and I got married, weirdly enough, I left and spent time with Laura and went to Florida and student taught in Oviedo. So Laura and I then lived together with another friend of ours, Molly, and we've got to really know each other then, obviously, when you're living and teaching and all of them thrown in the real world, you know, sent out of your little college bubble. And so we taught together and then really just kept in touch after that. And Laura has been an incredible, just emotional support system for me in terms of just being a great friend. She has been with us in this journey since day one, and always such an advocate, even on our behalf and on behalf of our son Fritz. And so we've been able to connect and get back to Florida a couple of times and spend time with her family, or vice versa. We've seen them. And then actually she and David are now the godparents of our daughter who was just born. So yeah.
That's so great.
Yeah.
Okay. How fun. I love those little connections and how sometimes these small Lutheran communities, I imagine you student taught at St. Luke's. Is that where you student taught?
Yes. Yeah. Yep, I did there. Yes. Yeah, it was a great experience.
So, okay, too, I have one other question that just popped in my head. The name Fritz, not a very common name. How did you get it?
So both sides, my husband and I are both German, you know, Lutheran Germans. That runs deep in our family's history. And so we were, as we're coming up with names for our kids, we wanted to be unique, but not too crazy. And we loved this, for some reason, we were just drawn to this idea of these old names and this idea of, so our first son's name is Hans, second son is Otto and Fritz, and our daughter is Ingrid. But when we had these our first boys, we were just thinking, like, I just love the idea of these old men sitting at a coffee shop with their coffee and their paper and their donuts. Like, what would their names be? Like, I want it to be them, you know, those guys that have quality conversations, everyone knows them. And so that's just we kind of looked at our family history and just were trying to like pull names, and started with Hans, which Frozen quickly followed, and then there was that link. So we like to say we had it first, and then Otto and Fritz followed. So
Otto says, I know another Otto just born too.
Yeah, so, that has probably been the more popular one we hear, to be honest, out of all of them. But yeah, that's where Fritz came from. So
I love that. So your nonprofit is called Fritz and Friends, right?
Fritz and Friends. Yeah, we kind of have this idea that within everyone that we bring into the circle, whether it's other Duchenne families, whether it's people like Laura, or now you guys there at Lutheran Counseling Service, you all become these friends of ours because we just developed this relationship where we feel like we now have support and help, and that's what friends do. So we say Fritz has a lot of friends, and we're so grateful for that, and we just constantly want to, keep growing that so we can keep doing what we're doing to really find a cure is our ultimate goal.
So what have been your challenges during this crazy time? Like, how has life gotten more complicated? An already complicated life gotten a little bit more complicated. Like, what does the pandemic look like from your perspective and with your family?
Yeah, it's so interesting because I feel like with how our family works and the different things we kind of have going on, there's a lot of lenses that I view the pandemic through. So in terms of our nonprofit, I would say that has been the most complicated lens, or the part of our life that has seen the most difficulty, just in the sense that we had to cancel, really every event. We don't have an event scheduled for the rest of this year, and it's really hard to then schedule post 2020, not knowing what that looks like. So that has been a really tricky part, and we've really had to get creative in, okay, he still has Duchenne. Duchenne is progressive, so time is not ever on our side. So to have a pandemic, in a sense, freeze time, or a lot of aspects of time, when you're talking about research and you're talking about a disease that progresses and gets worse with time, that was really hard. So we really had to kind of work through, how can we continue to fund research and raise money and raise awareness when we can't have these events? And so that was tough, but I would say, in the best sense, it, as like anything, it really grew us, and we started to explore new things. So it hasn't all been bad. It was tough at first, and it was a hard pill to swallow, but we've just we use this term now, and I kind of invented it accidentally, but it's like perfect. We say shiv it. It's a shiv. And so we really had to shiv it, like, and it comes with a good, like, gusto
good
of,
old
like,
gusto in there. Yeah.
too. So we've had to shiv it to doing a little more online and creating a presence there, which has really opened up doors that would not have been open if we didn't really pursue that. So as complicated as it's just been pursuing something new, which has been really exciting.
What kind of events did you host pre-pandemic?
So a huge one we had is we hosted this, it's called Cuts for a Cure. So another weird thing that we do, or not weird, but we own a barbershop, and it's called Fritz's Barbershop. And so it's in the heart of downtown Mesa, the city we live here in Phoenix. And my brother-in-law is the head barber there. And so the idea of that shop is to also then raise awareness to not just even Duchenne, really, to just being inclusive, to create this environment where people of any ability can come in and get a haircut. And so we run that barbershop. So within that, we do this Cuts for a Cure, where we have also basically a big festival. We had plans to partner with the downtown area, one of their big events, and we have a beer garden, and people come and get haircuts, and there's face painting, and there's all sorts of that. And all the proceeds from that day, the barbers all donate their time, then go to us. So that was one and we usually typically do it around Fritz's birthday. So it's like this ultimate celebration. So that was scheduled at the end of March. And so we had to, obviously, that was when it was really starting to begin. And there was a lot of, are we going to do it? Are we not? What do we do? What's the right call here? And then eventually, obviously, it wasn't an option. But that was a big one that we had up on our radar that we unfortunately just won't be doing this year.
I love that barbershop thing. I have a son on the autism spectrum, very high functioning, but getting his haircut, that is the worst. Like,
this is exactly why I would love to speak more to you in the future about, because we're trying to basically develop, how can we make an environment like that where there's lots of noises, lots of different sounds, lots of different experiences going on right here close to your head. So just really trying to be open and work with that. So families don't, when they come into a barbershop, have to feel uncomfortable with the way that their child might be reacting to that situation. So it's very common in Duchenne boys, actually, 1/3 to almost a half can have some level of autism as well, or Asperger's.
Wow.
So that's a very common thread too, which is another reason we've, kind of been inspired to really open that up for people, whether they're in a wheelchair or have sensory issues or whatever, to make it feel like they can do something like everyone else can do, and it not be, this big adventure, this big difficulty. So.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it took us a while to find a barber who would like really cut Micah's hair. And I'm so thankful for him. I will follow him anywhere. Like, if he moves anywhere, I will follow him. Because it's like, we're going to Jake. I don't even have to say haircut. We're going to Jake, and Jake got it. But
we've been offering like even little, like toys, like barber toys for kids to try to, like, that's kind of in the waiting room. And even having like inclusive books that talk about, kids that do have different, maybe just different perspectives or experiences with certain sensory things. So those are there within the waiting room already to just try and promote that, it doesn't really, we're not here to exclude anyone. If anything, we want anyone to have access to something like this. So we have a chair that's open as well. So someone that is in a wheelchair can just come right in. There's none of this trying to fit them in between or get them into the barber chair. It just is a very natural flow. So that's been a fun, kind of adventure, and something that Duchenne has opened our eyes to, because we really would have never, probably thought of a lot of those things in terms of just going to get a haircut.
Well, and I think that's a good segue too, of like, I don't think I would have never thought of it without having a son on the autism spectrum, or just other sensory pieces I would have never thought of. And so I know we're down here in Florida, like the crazy state over here, and, having all the discussions about going back to school and wearing masks and, all of these pieces. And so just so interested, I know I want to hear a little bit about your journey with school and the decisions that you've made for your kids about school, and then also your perspective on just kids that really struggle or special needs, and trying to adapt in a world that we as adults know has changed so much. What are your thoughts on some of those things, or what do
Yeah.
you do for your own family?
Yeah, so our family, pre-pandemic, we actually homeschool. So my older two are in first in kinder this last year. They'll be entering kinder
Mm-hmm.
or first and second. And we started homeschooling my oldest right away into kinder, and then my second has followed. So homeschooling for that age too is not this super complicated thing. And being an educator as well, like I have a background, so this is a comfortable space for me and something I used to do in my previous life, as I like to say. So we had been homeschooling, and to be honest, one of the reasons why we had made that decision is when Duchenne came into our family, it was kind of on our radar. And when you get this diagnosis of you're not going to know how much time you're going to have with this kiddo and what our family is going to look like and how it's going to change. And now we're traveling to doctor's appointments, and that really uprooted some of those, what you thought you might do, or we really had to think about school differently, like people are doing now. And with having just the background of education and feeling comfortable, it just made sense for our family to spend this time together, to homeschool. And it's been a really, just like anything, a roller coaster. We've had a lot of learning. It hasn't gone smoothly. There are days where I'm like, I need them in school. And there's other days where I'm like, oh, this is just the nicest thing. And sometimes that's not even a day, it's 1 hour. I think like, wow, I'm running a sweet ship here. And then the next, it's like, people are jumping off the edge trying to leave, me included sometimes. So it's never perfect, but it's really worked for our family. And it's really, I don't think we'll ever look back at this time at home, whether sometimes how stressful it is, and wish we weren't together at the end of the day. So that has been our approach with school. And I truthfully, I give props to all the educators and the school boards and the parents and politicians that are involved, because I don't think there's a right answer here. And I think just like for our family, homeschool works. I think that's going to be how they have to just approach school. Families will have to just look at what fits our family and makes the most sense for us. And I think when you're trying to do things that don't, you're not going to have peace there. So we have peace with what we're doing. And I'm thankful now. Who would have ever thought a pandemic? Because I wouldn't want to have to make those decisions with a high risk kiddo at this point. Luckily, in that sense, we're back to our shiveting. We won't have to shivet much there. We'll just keep doing what we're doing. So
how do you, I imagine you work with a lot or know a lot of families with Duchenne, and what are their struggles in school? Like how does that play out for them?
In school, this was, again, I think a reason that I just thought if I have this background, I'm confident with homeschooling, I think we're going to do it, because I'm in a lot of obviously like moms groups on Facebook and stuff. And so school is one of the biggest wrestling points for families, not in terms of whether to send them to school. That's a part of the issue, but they don't necessarily have an alternative, but trying to create inclusive environments for a kid who in second grade, he can't go play kickball with his peers. So how do you include him in recess, and how is the building accessible, or is it really, or there's an elevator but it's way in the next building over, so by the time his peers are at music, he's coming in 10 minutes later, and is that really an inclusive environment? So I know that in terms of IEPs and stuff, that can be a job in itself for special needs parents, especially ones with Duchenne, and they have to fight tooth and nail for a lot of that. And so that it's a tough one. And it's, again, there's no right answer. Every family handles it different. Every school is different. For a teacher from one year to the next might be different, and how their classroom is set up and how they go about it. But it is a huge struggle within the Duchenne community in trying to find a good fit, or how to make school really effective for their kiddo.
I love what you said too, like there's no right answer. Man, are we seeing so much of people thinking that there is always a right answer. And so just knowing like a right answer for me and my family is not going to be a right answer for you and your family. And I think we're seeing that so much more, but also the stress that comes about within our families as we maybe have to go through a couple options till we figure out what is the right answer for our family. Where do you see mental health being a contributing factor in special needs kids and special needs families? Like what kind of mental health issues bubble up in the communities that you work with?
Yeah, again, a huge topic. I feel like when you introduce special needs into a family, onto a mom in particular. I don't know if people ever will fully understand that until they find themselves in that situation. To be honest, I went through every, special education course in my degree and never had this grasp of what I'm wrestling with now. And so I think this has been, at least personally for me, the biggest learning point in navigating this, not only learning all the medical terms and all that stuff for him, but learning about myself and what I can tolerate, what are triggers. So anxiety for me set in high as we were waiting the diagnosis, and as I sat on Google and started to read terms about what I was going to be seeing, I started to do the violent shakes and the nausea, and I didn't understand that that was a panic attack, that those were setting in, that I couldn't catch my breath, and I had insomnia, food didn't taste good, and I still have that come in waves. And it's taken me a long time to step back and recognize what that is, what's causing that, how do I need to approach this situation so that I'm not in that space mentally. And I'm still learning. To be honest, the pandemic for us shut down a lot and it was really difficult. But in terms of my mental health, it provided a much healthier space because I could do what I just wanted to do and just be with my kid and spend time and almost have no commitments. And so it was this freeing sense, and it's been a time for me to really reflect and look at, when could I have said no, and why I didn't need to get to the point again of not sleeping and food not tasting well and having nausea. Like, that's not a normal thing. And so it's been a good time for me to reflect on that. But I think mental health is something that special needs parents battle next level, sometimes whether they know it or not. I've been a part of some studies actually that are so fascinating that test the stress hormone. They cut out a little bit of your hair. Have you seen this? And they test it, and then they'll do like a psychological or just a talk. You take a test. And so same for me, my test came back that I didn't appear stressed or fighting any sort of depression or anxiety. However, my stress hormone was insanely high. So that had just become my new normal. And I think that's the case for a lot of special needs, because you just got to do it because it's your kiddo's life that is, that you're fighting for.
Well, and I would think too, it's so interesting that you said the pandemic kind of slowed everything down. Like, there isn't all these outside things that also need attention. Like, we could just get full attention to our family and to our children, and those that, we really want to every day choose to give our full attention to. And I love that I don't love it, but that the first thing you talk about is panic or anxiety. That's so rooted in things that we can't control. And having a special needs child, there's so much you can't control. And I would imagine that is at the root of a lot of what families, parents struggle with. But I also know too, I work a lot with kids, and how do your other children cope with your son's disease? Kindergarten, first grade, probably just even be able to understand it. Is that right? Or how does that look?
Yeah. And again, it's just so crazy how with any difference or difficulty within children, like a special need or a disease or a diagnosis, how it creeps and takes over every aspect. So it doesn't just affect Fritz, and we say, he lives with the disease, but we all experience it in different ways. And so we've been really open with our older boys. My older kiddo, who's 7, he's more like going on 50. We joke, he's an old soul. He's very in tune. He likes to have adult conversations. And so he is
it time? That sounds like an old soul.
It's perfect. He's an old soul. So we've been, because diagnosis has been since they've always remembered, because it was right when Fritz was nearly born and they were so young as well. They don't remember a life without Duchenne, which I think works for us in some senses, because we're not having to just completely, shift it over to this idea and teach them new things. It's always just been a part of our life. And we've just taken the approach in our family that we're very open about it. So we talk about what Duchenne is in an age appropriate manner, but we talk about what it is. We talk about what it might look like. And to be honest, as much as I hate Duchenne with everything in my being and would do anything to cure it, it has bettered me as a parent, because I'm now raising kids that are inclusive and have to be constantly in their play in the living room. When we're outside, they constantly have to be mindful of how do we help Fritz be involved in this. And I have to help promote that as well. And so I think that has just made us stronger as a family. It's very difficult. It comes at a high cost sometimes of tears and anxiety. But we've learned that when we have those conversations and when we face that hard together, we're ultimately, better in the end, and our family's closer, and we're all mentally, I think, better, because we know we don't always have to be on. Maybe Hans, a lot of times my other two kiddos have the best idea for how to include him when I'm stuck and I'm watching him not do something, and that kills me as a mom, because he should be able to. As a 4-year-old, I just watch Hans come up with an idea of how to include him, and it's so brilliant. And I think sometimes we just don't give kids enough credit. And inclusion, I don't think, has to be so hard always. And we make it that way because our adult brains think, it needs to be this complicated thing. But I've really taken a lot of time to learn from them as well. And like I said, I think it's just now in their nature, because it's always had to be, because they've always lived with this diagnosis of their brother. So
I had somebody else on too, when we were talking about how some kids that are so young right now, this coronavirus has changed our world, but they won't know the changes. And that just makes me think of what you're talking about with your son. What are some self-care routines that you practice, that you and your husband practice, just to be able to take care of yourself, giving so much time to a special needs child? How do you take care of yourself?
Yeah, we one thing that we constantly try to talk about, almost like cup fillers, like what really fills us. And so for my husband and I, it's each different. But one thing for me is just family time outdoors. So I love packing up the car and going on a hike, and just getting outside. To me is just, there's some power in that. And then doing that with my family. Like, I just love that. It's different than the mundane of doing the dishes and the laundry and that kind of stuff. So that's something that we try to be really mindful of, that, once a month, and it looks different now, obviously during COVID, but that we do get out. And so this last weekend, we just went up to a lake and hiked around, and it was everything I needed to keep going for 2 weeks. Sometimes for me, it was like thrifting, like going to a thrift store, walking around.
I love that.
It's like retail therapy that I can afford. You know what I mean? Like, yes. I don't feel guilty when I leave because I spent $3 on a shirt. And sometimes it's just the walking and looking, and my brain's in another place. But being in Phoenix, if in the summer it's 100 and whatever out, that's just a safe space, air conditioning space for me to just kind of get out of the house. Again, COVID has made that look different for us, but so that has been a thing. And then a lot of times at night, it's just, we do a check-in with each other. And sometimes it's just, my husband just needs to just turn his brain off, and he's an introvert, so he needs that time to just be quiet. So it's that balance of, I often want to just like chat all day because I haven't seen an adult, and he needs to like decompress. So he enjoys just taking time to maybe watch a movie or do something like that. And overall, I think we just enjoy being together as a family. So anytime we can do that and do something new together is just something that we all really cherish and enjoy.
I love that too what your husband needs. I think that's so important in a marriage, that he knows what you need and you know what he needs. And so when one of us is at a breaking point, we can be like, did you get what you needed today?
Yeah. I have girls' nights occasionally. It's obviously looked different as more kids have come along, but he's so great. And then he's turned it into, this was pre my daughter, but boys' night. So they did mac and cheese, Minions on the little Apple TV, and Ninja Warrior. That was like, they lived there. So now even they'll say to me, don't you need to go to a girls' night? I'm like, I think I do, actually.
I'm out of here. That's awesome. Well, I've asked you so many questions. Did you have any questions for me, or anything that we didn't chat about that you wanted to?
No, I would just love to just hear your take on, and switch the question a little bit, just from almost one special needs mom to another. What does mental health look like for you, and what are your coping, or what does that just general scope look like for you? Because I'm learning it can be so different across the board, but it's still usually always present in special needs parenting.
Yeah, it's my son is an introvert, like 100%. I mean, I think there was one day during this pandemic where I don't think I even saw him. Like he will stay, like he needs his quiet time. But for us recently with him, it's the argument about going back to school. And he doesn't see the benefit. And for me as a mental health care worker, like I know my son needs to be around people. It might not be what he wants,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
he needs to be engaging with individuals. He's 13, and the power of just peer support during adolescence is really important. And we had this week, my daughter plays club volleyball. I told you that's where I was today. And a girl on a team that they normally play against killed herself 3 nights ago. So it's just really on my heart, the isolation for adolescents, and in this time period for him, which is difficult being an adolescent already and then being on the spectrum. He knows very much about himself, and man, does he try to manipulate it. I'm an introvert. I don't like people, all that kind of stuff. So it's just like being ahead of the game and making mental health a priority for him, I think is important. Because if it were up to him, he would game all day and never walk, and like he would never see anybody. So for me as a mom, that's been important. But also what's important, and I tell people this all the time, is I'm very blunt with him. I don't sugarcoat things or have like fancy words around things. Because he's a very literal person. So I just you almost like go for the jugular. Like you say what you want to say and you just say it. Where like my girls, I would kind of dance around, and like be gentle and nice. So I think it's about knowing your kid and just kind of being there. But I was telling my dad the other day, I have the best conversations with him in the car because he can't walk away from me. But when we're not going to school or we're not going to any events, like I don't have that opportunity in the car to like lock him in and talk to him. Yeah. So I'm going to have to find some more of those, because those are super important to me to have with him as well. But yeah, thanks for asking. I think it's hard sometimes making mental health a priority when, like health is an issue. So to think about mental health can be a difficult one to place a priority on.
Yeah, and I think like in our case, in terms of rare disease, you can never almost feel like you're doing enough, because the end goal is the cure, and you could work your tail off and that might not even happen. There's always more to do, better ways to do what you're already doing. And so it's this constant wrestling of finding, I feel like for me, the balance of, okay, I'm giving enough work here and being at peace with that, because my health is also a part of it. And if I don't take care of that, I can't do this. And so
right. It is a fine balance.
You're just constantly, yeah.
And I think our body tells us, like maybe a panic attack is a sign of like, okay, you're a little off balance. Like you need to reprioritize this.
For sure. Yes, for sure.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. How can we pray for you or support you in any way?
Yeah, I mean, we constantly, people praying for the work that we're doing, or for doors to open, or the right things. That's always just a part of it, or just simply even, for peace and strength as we navigate some of those unknowns or the difficult questions that arise, within having a child that has a terminal disease. So always just those types of things are so needed and appreciated. And then outside of that, we just right now during the pandemic, because there's not a lot going on, just following us on social media. It's just such a great way to like and share and comment for our story to get out there. And again, because it's rare disease, we have to advocate and we have to really put our story out there. And when other people do it, it becomes a lot easier and opens a lot more doors. And so that's just another great way to kind of follow along with our journey, but also really support us in that.
So is it Fritz and Friends on all platforms?
Fritz and Friends DMD, which is Duchenne muscular dystrophy. But I'm pretty sure if you just search Fritz and Friends, you'll find us on there. And you can kind of follow along with. We share a lot of anything from the difficulties of Duchenne to the crazy antics that are happening in our house with 4 kids. So it's kind of all over the place.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And I'll be one of your first followers here in a couple minutes and check it out for sure. We'll be back again next week with another episode of Authenticity, sharing authentic stories through this crisis time. But thank you so much. And I
Thank
look
you for
forward
having
to
me.
seeing and talking to you again.
For
Bye.
sure. Thank you.